John 6:16. Ut autem serro factum est, descenderunt discipuli eius ad mare. And when it became evening, his disciples went down to the sea. This is a relatively brief and simple verse, but as always, there are some fun things for us to consider that will improve our fluency and confidence when reading the Vulgate elsewhere in other books at other times without the benefit of these videos. So I'm going to dilate as the Spirit moves on a few different things. First here, ut autem, we might want to note, since this looks a little bit weird in Latin usage, this is simply the equivalent of Greek hos de, but when, or really, and when. We've talked before about how ut in Latin, when used this way, simply as a temporal adverb, is not all that common outside of the period in which the Vulgate was introduced. Autem, as very often, does not have adversative sense, but is merely a conjunction here. So that's the first thing we want to note. We also want to talk about this word serro. Serro factum est is the phrase. And you know already that the way we translate this is to say, it became evening. Literally something like evening happened. And that's more or less exactly what it says in the Greek. Serro, though, strictly speaking, is an adverb derived from the adjective serus, which means late, generally in a temporal sense. So late in the day, late at night, something like that. Serro, the adverb, as an adverb, is used very frequently. It's also used in a few different interesting phrases. This usage is a little bit strange and unusual. There are ways to say evening or at evening. For instance, as Erasmus notes, we could just say vespere, in the evening, descenderunt discipuli, etc. But again, remember, our translator is always trying as scrupulously as possible to imitate Greek usages and even turns of phrase, and that seems to be what's happening here. Erasmus also tells us something closer to a noun phrase like this does appear in the historian Livy. He adduces the phrase there, serum diei, that is literally the late part of the day. So our translator could have used a phrase like this, but instead he just used the adverbial form, serro. It became late. It was late. Late in the day, that is evening, probably rather than late at night. Although it can be used that way as well. The rest is relatively unremarkable. The disciples went down to the sea, and of course, in context, this is the Sea of Galilee that we're talking about. And then in verse 17, we're going to move on to new and different events as this sentence continues.